Hey guys, I'm here. Welcome back. We're going to be checking out another breakdown from New Rockstars for this week's episode of The Mandalorian. I think the word of mouth right now is that everybody's really enjoying this last episode. So hopefully that follows through in this one. And we could all have fun talking about things that were hidden in the episode. So let's go ahead and dive into this breakdown. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Mandalorian Chapter 23, Season 3, Episode 7, The Spies. From Shadow Council cameos to clues the armor might be up to something, I'm going to break down this episode shot by shot for all the details you might have missed. And subscribe to my new channel, The Deep Dive, for deeper analyses into titles like Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. I think my favorite video I've ever made. Second to this one you're about to watch. And thank you to Boxu for sponsoring this video. More
nice
on their
save.
Tasty offerings later. Okay, we open on the rainy lower levels of Coruscant, looking particularly more Blade Runner-y than usual, especially with a lot of
I love this opening shot, man.
Particularly cruel since her victim, Dr. Pershing, adopted this look back in Chapter 19. Now, this is a part of Coruscant that we would have explored in the 1313 game, and the constantly being developed Star Wars Underworld from Ronald D. Moore, creator of Battlestar Galactica, would have been such a good show. And the Orbesh on all the neon signs translate to things, most of them misspelled words, like vertical in pink is cybernetiox. I thought it said cybernetics, which would make sense, but no, that fifth letter is not an R, it's an N, and that is definitely an O after the I.
What in the world?
Isn't anything in Star Wars, and kind of like that Orbesh meta
it could be somebody's name, maybe.
Last episode that added a P to the word however, sometimes they just don't spell it right. So why do I even bother? Well, it's because I'm a know-it-all, and this is the way. So let's keep going. To the right, vertical in blue, further back, either food or idoof, depending on which way you go. Toward the bottom in white, the word play. On the left, vertical in blue, something ENTS. And then over on the right, horizontal in yellow, AHKQ. Beneath that, vertical in blue, Bronwyn, I assume one of the text artists' daughters or girlfriends. And beneath those, text angled on a corner in white, GRQLUS. And then across the
or a Rings of Power
green,
fan.
AOJRN. Across the alley, vertical in red again, Cybernetiox, not cybernetics. And then
again,
that, horizontal in pink, FDG, as in dumbass waste of time this was, as Elia Kane across the street in red circles the word alley, and then blue vertical calf, CAF. Actual words. Calf is the in-universe name for coffee in Star Wars. And then triangles light up with look, then at, then me. Look at me, I am changing. An Imperial probe droid with an evil red eye, like the droids who went bad on Plaisir last episode, or like Hal in 2001 Space Odyssey, finds Kane and scans her face with one of those awesome blue scanners like Carson Tava's droid had at the end of Chapter 21, like the probes in the beginning of James Cameron's Aliens look so cool. Moff Gideon's hollow projection beams out in open air. He is an escaped war criminal, but I guess this is safer for Elia Kane than her amnesty housing unit. And we learn that the pirate nation of Gorian Shard was aligned with Moff Gideon's pro-imperial conspiracy, and that Gideon grumbles upon hearing that the Night Owls of Axe Woves and the Children of the Watch have combined forces under the leadership of Bo-Katan Kryze.
Which is something he would have already known if the armorer was the spy. Again, I talked about this before. I just think it's like way too obvious. I think that whole thing's like a red herring. Plus, we'll probably get into it a little bit later, that she left conveniently before the ambush, but you got to remember, she's heading into her own ambush. Gideon has sent bombers and interceptors to cut them off, so there really isn't any escape right now.
The episode is titled The Spies, plural. And to be a spy, you have to be someone with a duplicitous agenda. So after Elia Kane, who was the other spy of this episode? An argument could be made for the armorer, and I will make it, but since Axe Woves wasn't present for Gideon's arrest in Chapter 16, touch on this, and conveniently ended up with Gideon's light cruiser, I think he might be the other spy. Someone who'd still be loyal to Gideon, so long as Gideon could pay up. That could be why Gideon here asks, which Mandalorians? And he denies that any Mandalorian would cooperate with each other. He's gonna make a call to his buddy Axe, and Axe is gonna be like, what, Mando made a really great speech about the Darksaber, and all these idiots who I hang out with read Harry Potter and think the Elder Wand logic made sense. So Gideon,
oh god damn it. This is definitely something I really wanted to touch upon, because I got a comment on my video that has completely changed the way I was looking at this episode, and I can't see it any other way now. I think the title is a misdirect if you take it at face value. As we know, John and Dave, as far as how they wanted to build out the mythology and the theology of the Mandalorians, took a lot of references from the Western world. They kind of see the Jedi as more Eastern influenced, So they kind of wanted to separate the two clans, the two ideologies, by kind of leaning to Western structures. And we've seen a lot of Western language, specifically religious language, used when talking about the covert. So someone pointed out in the comments that there have been other people that have made whispers or comments that they think this is a biblical reference. In the Bible, Moses, when him and his people left Egypt to scout ahead to try to find out if their land, where they were heading, the lands of Canaan, were inhabitable, he took one member from each of the 12 tribes to scout ahead. The scouts that Moses sent are referred to as the 12 spies. Not 12 scouts, 12 spies. And the spies in this, I believe, are the ones sent down to spy on Mandalore to make sure that it is safe, to scout ahead. If you count Bo, who is the one that issued this command, that came up with this plan, she would be our Moses figure, wielding the Darksaber instead of the commandments. Because, excluding Bo, 12 Mandalorians went down to the planet's surface. And what were they doing there? They were scouting ahead to make sure their promised land was safe for the greater people to come down and settle. I can't see it any other way now. And while they did kind of frame some shots to make us suspicious, I think they know what we would be thinking when we're looking at that title. And we've had kind of religious titles before leading up to this, and I think that this is kind of has a double meaning, or at least a trick meaning behind it. Like we have been the entire time. There's been things throughout the series that has been making us question whether or not we should trust Bo, whether or not we should trust even the covert at all. Like, do they have their secret agendas? At the end of the day, every step of the way, it doesn't seem like that. And it would be very much in line with how the show has been playing with our perceptions to make us on edge as we're heading into the finale, feel unsafe, to make us cast doubt on the trustworthiness of anybody that is part of this party. So I don't know. I like that because, I mean, it's just so, it's too uncanny. At least I am hoping that is the case, because again, I would prefer that this infighting end and we kind of get past that point, because I feel like that was the whole point of this episode as well, is to prove that they have melded together, and to see that fractured, it would just be so disappointing in the end. Not disappointing, heartbreaking rather, especially after the loss of Paz Vizsla, a true believer in the covert, and Din. It would be such a crap move on the armor's part, on Axe's part, on whoever it would be if we do take this in a literal sense and it turns out that was the case. But I just wanted to put that out there because once I heard that, it's just such an uncanny resemblance, and especially with the Western and at some points Christian and biblical themes that encompass the inspirations for the Mandalorian culture. It's almost like spot on what we're seeing here, right down to the number of people that came down from orbit to scout ahead. Yeah. Anyway, let's move back on.
With red shield walls opening up like that corridor on Naboo and Phantom Menace when they're fighting Darth Maul, effectively this creates a tiered security system. Like, you know, the opening sequence of Get Smart, because rooms open up between each of these red shield walls, but only Gideon has access to the furthest inner room. Each gate is flanked by stormtroopers with a new generation of armor, Beskar, we later learn, shaped to look like the First Order stormtrooper design. He passes tanks
Well, actually, I had to look this up and double check it after the fact. I'm pretty sure those are Imperial Super Commandos, which we saw Gar Saxon lead in like 2 episodes of Rebels, I think, when they sided with the Imperials, because they were Mandalorians who had proven their allegiance to the Empire, and they had these Stormtrooper-esque Mandalorian Beskar outfits, though then they were Mandalorian, and who knows if these are clones from those tanks or just recruits of Gideon's. Who knows? They definitely yelled and like grunted like people. So I don't think they were like some kind of like battle ready advanced dark trooper unit or anything like that. I do think there were people in those suits. I don't know if they were Mandalorian though, but for all we know, they could be just part of his little clone army he's already kind of started. But yeah, those are Imperial Super Commandos. They just have like a little more color to them than they did in Rebels. They were like pretty much just stark white all the way through, and these have like these resemble a little more closely like the First Order coloration, which has a little more black incorporated into the outfit, even some red throughout some bits of it. But yeah, anyway, moving on.
Obtaining obscure figures, these look like further attempts at Snoke strandcasts, like on the Navarro base in Chapter 12, like those folks who keep yeasts in jars all over their homes.
Well, I mean, it is similar to what we saw there, but I think this episode confirms that Gideon isn't working on what we've seen in his bases are not for Snoke's project. That's under Hux's control, and while his research has been aiding in that, I thought they had clarified and at least said pretty much straightforward that his project they didn't even know about until they found out about it recently, that he had been doing his own side experiments, which he straight up talked about here, that he and Pershing, who we learned what Pershing's speciality was, which was this hybridization of different genes. And that's exactly what he said here. He was taking the best of these different peoples and trying to make this super soldier out of it by combining the best elements of each.
This is just something Gideon does in his spare time to try to be the first with a winner. Now, since this base is on Mandalore, these guys could be stewing in living waters taken from the springs where the Mythosaur was. Gideon's whole agenda is to take the best of all cultures, cloners, Jedi, Mandalorians, and to use all these things to feed the First Order, so why not throw in some Mando Dasani? We meet Captain Gilad Pellaeon, a hugely important figure from Star Wars legends, starting with Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire Thrawn novels, in which he's Thrawn's protege, and he looks exactly like this. Mustache, insignia, he's got that lowered cap, that pompous pout. He's played by the perfectly cast Xander Berkeley, Gregory in The Walking Dead, and a ton of other roles. This is the first time we've seen Captain Pellaeon in live action after a brief vocal cameo in Rebels.
So they came out of hyperspace. I've never seen them.
And his appearance here tells us that Thrawn is coming. Thrawn briefly appeared in the Ahsoka trailer and is confirmed to be played by Lars Mikkelsen, the Thrawn voice actor from Rebels, and apparently showed his face in some bonus Ahsoka footage shown exclusively at Star Wars Celebration. Pellaeon urges the others to present themselves as unorganized remnant warlords, a bit of justification for how the First Order was able to rise under the New Republic's nose during this period. He also says Grand Admiral Thrawn's return will herald in the re-emergence of our military and provide Commandant Hux enough time to deliver on Project Necromancer. So part of Pellaeon's strategy is to wait for Thrawn to return so the Imperial fleet will have a popular wartime leader that will rally more to their cause. Speaking of the importance of singular military leaders in real-world history to rally the base, kind of like George Washington and the Revolutionary Army or Robert E. Lee to the Confederate Army. Meanwhile, Commandant Hux is Brendel Hux, father to Armitage Hux, played here by Brian Gleason, brother to Armitage Hux actor Donald Gleason. They kept it in the family, and it's just perfect casting. The
That's just hilarious, though.
By Delilah S. Dawson explores the early years of the First Order and the role Brendel Hux and Armitage Hux played in recruiting child soldiers as First Order stormtroopers, as was the case for Finn and Janna from Rise of Skywalker. But now we learn that Brendel Hux also oversees Project Necromancer. So necromancy refers to the black magic art of communicating with the dead or resurrecting their spirits, and this is their code word for the Sith Eternal plot to resurrect Palpatine via cloning. So instead of somehow Palpatine returned, now we get Project Necromancer. But Brendel accuses Gideon of making this a bit extracurricular. Gideon has been conducting his own cloning research with Dr. Pershing on Navarro, something that he hasn't CC'd Hux on, suggesting that Gideon hoped to go over Brendel's head to be the warlord with the first cocktail of high M count blood to resurrect Palpatine. Also,
I don't think he cares about Palpatine. I think he's got an ego that is out of control, because he's like, what makes this armor better? Me. I think he's trying to either, who knows? He could even be a clone himself. There could be like an army of Gideons out there somewhere. We don't even know that he's the real one, and we don't know how far this experiment goes. But, you know, he seems to be trying to do something on his own. Now, I don't even know if it's in favor, to gain favor with Palpatine or to be the first to do it. I think he's clearly doing this as a power play. I think he is all about him, with using the Empire as a guise. And maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe it is exactly as Eric says here, that he is trying to beat them to the punch, because he does kind of create his rivals. He does consider Thrawn a rival. So, like, it is an interesting idea if that is the case. But I had read it as like this like narcissistic kind of like power fantasy he's trying to create for himself in secret, but we'll have to find out, I guess.
Also, interesting detail. Notice Hux and Pelion are the only two of these warlords to wear classic Imperial uniforms. The others don't have the benefit of strong navies with thick holes to command from. These others have to get by on scraps and sometimes have to hide in plain sight. Gideon casts doubt on Thrawn's return, talking about him as if he was a ghost that they all need to move on from, which will either bite Gideon in the ass, or maybe it's a sign that Thrawn's arc on Ahsoka might have nothing to do with the First Order, which is kind of what I'm hoping for, honestly. Make the guy a rogue. Sorry, Pelion. I just don't think that guy cares that much about what's going on here. Gideon has sent in a request for 3 Praetorian Guards, reinforcements for his TIE interceptors, and bombers from Pelion. Now, the Praetorian Guards are the red-suited First Order warriors that stood by Snoke in The Last Jedi with all their melee weapons. In my opinion, the most badass fighters in the sequel trilogy. So excited to see more of these guys, and the name Praetorian Guards actually comes from ancient Rome. Why does Gideon want these? Well, he did lose a hand-to-hand duel with Din Djarin. He knows he can't keep up in any kind of melee situation, so it's a smart request. Gideon says,
I am increasingly confident that they are preparing to retake their home world of Mandalore.
And yeah, again, I don't think we realized it when we're first watching this episode, but right now, Gideon is currently on Mandalore. I'm pretty sure that this facility with its rock walls is close to that Great Forge location that we end the episode on. So the others don't want Gideon's Beskar mining operation disrupted. They all need it. Now remember, in past episodes, visitors to Mandalore had no communication from the surface. We thought it was just from the weather patterns, but it might actually been part of a signal jamming process emitted by Gideon to keep their operation hidden.
I was thinking about that too, because I literally wrote this down on a notepad. I was like, when I was starting to think about it, I was like, how are they able to have these Skype calls if you can't actually transmit out of the surface? The only options I could think of is if they actually have a tower that breaches the storm and sends out that signal and receives, or they're jamming it themselves, that the storm is either artificial or a cover story for what is actually causing the interference.
Presumably, Gideon set this up after the purge, after all the Mandalorians were gone from the planet, using Imperial propaganda that this planet was cursed and radioactive to keep people away from it.
Yep.
Okay, on to Navarro. The locals are cleaning up after that pirate attack in Chapter 21. I don't see the wreckage of Gorian Shard's Corsair anywhere back there, but you know, VFX is expensive. They all look up to see, what is it? It's an Imperial light cruiser! But actually no, this is Moff Gideon's old ship, now with its underbelly repainted with a red mythosaur skull.
Can you imagine how long it would have taken to paint that sucker? Because I think, like, when we look at these things at scale, unless it's a Star Destroyer, I mean, this is a light cruiser, but, like, still, it's huge. Like, that's a lot of surface area. That's a lot of paint.
Skull by Axe Wove's division. The time it must have taken to paint that. Now, while Grief Karga makes it seem like this is one of the few times a massive ship overhead isn't meant to evoke fear, again, we are still waiting to find out Axe Wove's true loyalties here. So I think that sense of fear is intentional here. As Bo-Katan deboards, we first see her dark saber now hanging from her hip, something that you know the members of the Watch must notice immediately. The armorer bangs her hammer on her tongs, recreating that music she talked about. Remember hearing from the Great Forge. Behind her, that crate is labeled in the Mandoa language. On the side, that's the numbers 1024, and then on the front, a mythosaur and the word ammo. Grief Karga gives Mando with what looks like some Coruscant scotch and a rebooted IG-11 who enters at the side at first to reveal it's actually being piloted by an Anzellan droid smith. Pretty unsettling to see this guy's exposed ass and his calves as he climbs out. But Grogu looks up from that bowl of candy that he was munching on in Chapter 17 and he coos when he sees his old squeeze.
Bad baby.
No squeezy.
It's pretty cute to see Grogu being worn by this IG droid like a Bjorn. I'll go back to when IG-11 saved Grogu and wore him that way at the end of Season 1, but now Grogu operates IG-12 like a mech suit, giving child control over his movement. He can finally keep up and stop fights, I guess. But few things bring me more joy than the idea of Grogu punching yes and no on repeat like a pet soundboard to ask for food, but in Grogu's case, his opportunity to say yes, 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 and yes, just to show how happy he is feeling on every step of this droid.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. So Grogu just starts pigging out on food from a vendor, and he grabs a Melaroon fruit that he squeezes all over this Tarsant merchant.
No, squeezy.
At the feast, they roast on a spit what looks like either an Eope or a Kadu. I thought it was one of those winged reptilian creatures, but I don't see any wings here. The two sides sit apart from each other. The peacetime sigil of House Vizsla, its red-leafed branch on a white banner, hangs over where they sit. But Bo-Katan says it's time for all of them to retake Mandalore, saying dormant species have been awakened by the bombings, including Mythosaur and another big boy we meet this episode. She proposes proposes that they go to Mandalore while she leads a scouting party, asking for volunteers, and about a dozen of them volunteer as tribute, including the armorer.
I will go as well.
Yeah, there's a shady sound effect that plays as the armorer steps up. Not sure if it's meant to convey Bo-Katan's respect for her or for us to cast doubt on the armorer's motives. As they all look down at the ruins of Mandalore, Paz Vizsla says it's worse than he thought, and the guy...
See, the thing is, I don't know why she would go with the intent of just leaving. Like, because she didn't... Like, it didn't... Aside from getting those people off the planet, it didn't benefit her or them at all for her to have volunteered to go. I thought it was just a spiritual thing. Again, showing her dedication to this and wanting to see the Forge again for herself. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I'm just hoping against hope, man.
And next to him says,
I was here when it happened.
Yikes, say more, friend. As the camera pushes into Din Djarin, and all those blue helmets sitting in a row shake their heads in astonishment. Bo-Katan orders to search for the Forge.
We start scouting in that direction. Form up.
And she
looks
smiles.
so happy. I don't think we've ever seen her smile this much. But the armorer heel turns behind her. Obviously impossible to tell her expression, but she's definitely more reserved and ponderous than Bo-Katan is. The sky they march under has these clouds that rapidly zip toward them, kind of like a terrestrial hyperspace. They run into 3 more Mandalorians on a land skiff, kind of like Mad Max pirates, a roving gang of survivors who refuse to leave the planet after the Purge. They include actor Charles Parnell from Top Gun Maverick, who played Warlock, and Charles Baker. He played Skinny Pete on Breaking Bad. Over dinner, Bo-Katan confesses that she did surrender.
I didn't recognize Pete.
Oscar Reeves leans in to try to stop Bo-Katan, but Bo-Katan waves her off, showing us that this is the truth that these women knew and shared with each other, and presumably Axe Woves did as well, which could be another reason why Woves might have had a reason to betray her by playing ball with Gideon. Like from Axe Woves' point of view, these 2 leaders are equally bad, but at least Gideon pays better. We also get some clarity on the timeline of the Night of 1,000 Tears incident. First was the bombings, then there was a period of negotiation between Bo-Katan and the ISB, and then after she surrendered the Darksaber to Moff Gideon, then he betrayed her by purging the planet anyway. And so in that Book of Boba Fett flashback, that's the point where we saw the droids going through there with the Beskar helmets in the ashes. So the armorer tells Warlock and Skinny Pete,
We were hidden on the moon of Concordia.
Were you Death Watch?
Death Watch exists no longer.
and behind her, I'm pretty sure that is the moon of Concordia shining in the sky. Remember earlier in the dropship, at least one of them still had the Death Watch sigil of the Shriek Hawk on their shoulders. But we definitely can read into the armorer saying the Death Watch exists no longer, especially with the horns on her helmet. In Clone Wars, the members of the Death Watch that served Maul had horns on their helmets to pay respect to him. And in this episode, Moff Gideon's new Beskar armor has horns on the helmet. Could part of the Death Watch ideology have lived on in the armorer? I don't know. I just hope she's not Kira or something. So Din tells Bo-Katan about the Darksaber, saying, I only know of this weapon what you taught me. To be honest, it means nothing to me or my people, nor does station or bloodline. What means more to me is honor and loyalty and character. It's interesting how in this episode, the Darksaber is not used in any kind of duel or conflict, only as a means for the Mandalorians to retreat and escape. Survival of one's people is the highest honor. The pirates take into the Forge as the armorer takes the wounded survivors in the gauntlet back up to the ship. From here forward, the armorer has sidelined herself from the action, and the episode keeps cutting back to her as if something might happen, maybe a red herring, or maybe a reminder the armorer conveniently evaded Gideon's trap while the others stepped right in it. During a chess-like game, Axe Woves and Paz Vizsla end up in a fight with Vibro blades, which really get close looks here. One framed right in front of Axe's face.
I love the look of them.
In the IG-12 suit stops them.
No.
Din says he didn't learn that from me, referring to Grogu's Zen training under Luke Skywalker in the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 6. Remember all that character development that happened in another person's show?
Somebody also made a comment that this could also have been him learning from Bo, but she didn't realize that because she did say this fighting has to stop, and Grogu was there for that speech that they have to come together. So it could be either. In the moment, I was definitely like, oh yeah, that was another thing he probably learned, like peaceful negotiations from Luke or something like that. But it could have been Bo.
A giant creature burst out of the ground. At first we thought a Mythosaur, but no, it's just some other kaiju who might have also been awakened by the bombings. So Mandalorians, are you sure you want to settle down here? This place kind of sucks. The survivor urges them to go further into the caves, meaning this creature wrecked their ship right by the exact place they needed to go? Huh. We see the ruins of the Great Forge, looking a lot like the mines in Fellowship of the Ring, a once great civilization wrecked by war, and there are piercing beams of light cutting through the darkness, just as there were in Moria. That's how they lit their way through
Yeah.
darkness. Then Beskar armored Imperial stormtroopers swoop in, leading to this shootout. Two of the pirates get kicked off a ledge.
Imperial Super Troopers, Super Commandos.
One stormtrooper gets lasted around the neck and flown away via jetpack. Din Djarin clotheslines one of them in the stomach and shoots him right between his helmet and shoulder plate.
Yeah, he unloaded into his head, man.
Same spot on another one. Because they are Mandalorian, they know better exactly where the gaps in the armor
Yep.
are. So they get the imps on the run, but one must wonder if this retreat was intentional as part of this overall trap. Because in the heat of the battle, our Mandos don't even realize that they've transitioned from cave ruins to a well-swept Imperial corridor. It's a haunting realization that they realize too late when they see the TIE interceptors hanging like freaking bats here on their home planet that they've been longing to reclaim. They realize a massive evil force has already set up shop, and Moff Gideon descends in Dark Trooper armor. He declares his
God, I love that, because like I called this, I'm pretty sure I called this back in season 1, that he was based on Mandalore.
goal to take the best of Mandalorians, the cloners, and the Jedi to serve the next generation, declaring their time is done. Basically saying he's going to appropriate all these things to feed the First Order. He takes Din Djarin to a debriefing room. You know what that means. Hopefully Borgullet! But Bo-Katan refuses to surrender the Darksaber as Paz Vizsla holds them all off with his heavy repeating blaster. It overheats, so he takes out the rest by hand. Tate Fletcher just kicking ass and taking names. But those three...
Oh, speaking of Tate Fletcher, I've seen time and time again, like a bunch of different reactors and stuff like that say this as well throughout the season. Jon Favreau has not voiced him this season. It's all like it's been Tate Fletcher in the suit and Tate Fletcher voicing the character this season. Jon Favreau has only been the voice in the seasons 1 and seasons 2. So I don't think a lot of people have been aware of that so far, though.
Praetorian Guards arrive, and Paz is no match. Using their melee weapons, purple ones compared to the red glowing ones from The Last Jedi, they stab him in the gaps of the armor, under the breastplate in the ribcage, in the leg, and in the shoulder through the neck. It's a tragic end. And so we're left with the question, who was that second spy? I get the suspicion toward the armor. We talked about that in WikiLeaks. I just don't know what she would have to gain from working with Gideon, or when she would
Again,
have
I don't think any of them are a spy.
Axe Wolves was
Or I'm
certainly
just-
motivated, and it was hard to clock exactly where he was during this final ambush. We should also look at those pirates. They did mysteriously survive on Mandalore and led everyone directly into this trap. I want to know from you, which Mandalorian do you think has Paz Vizsla's blood on their hands? Whoever it was, there is reason we saw the Mythosaur at the beginning of the season. Bo-Katan, I believe, is destined to use this ancient creature to bring a brutal end to Moff Gideon's
Dude,
agenda
I
to fill
hope
the power
so.
void among the Imperial warlords, while I assume Thrawn will finally return in a post-credit scene. The only reason I can imagine for Giancarlo Esposito to return this season is to have an epic end where he gets gobbled down or stomped by a Mythosaur. Hey, remind
That
me to
would be
subscribe to our new
awesome.
channel.
But yeah, man, again, like I think the entire squadron are the spies, if we're talking about it in that parable sense, that biblical sense, you know, because the comparison is just too uncanny, and it's just gotta be it. That's gotta be it. And I think the rest was just a red herring to enhance the tension of the episode. And I'm really nervous about next week's episode, man. I really am. Guys, were there any Easter eggs that you guys caught that they didn't mention here in this video? If so, leave those in the comments below. I would love to give them a read. With that said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole spies thing. Do you think it is more this Moses and his 12 spies, or do you think there is actually a spy who is a traitor working and helping Gideon? Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. If you enjoy this reaction, which I hope you did, please leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you're not already, and stay tuned for more as we dive into the finale next week. And before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends: Manny Scherer, Ryan Karen, Jason Coleman, Philly Vane, Yori Coruscant, Margaret Grace, Melito, Robert Anguiano, Raven McGann, Jeffrey Hale, M. Sephiroth, Jake Cantrell, and Josh Lee. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. That's it for this video, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one. May the Force be with you always. Take care, everybody.